To the organizers of the 2022 De La Salle Research Congress, to my co-presenters, to the participants and audience, a pleasant day to everyone. My name is Julius Satparam, a teaching personnel from the Bicol University, Legazpi City, and I will be presenting the paper entitled Reinventing Flipped Learning, an exploratory study on the use of online flipped learning in the new normal. Now, we all know that the recent advances in technologies have allowed changes on how instruction is delivered and are continuing to enable more student-centered pedagogies. The flipped or inverted learning, for example, which is characterized as a teaching and learning approach that moves lecture delivery out of the classroom to allow students engagement in active learning activities inside the classroom, highlights the potential of technology-enhanced instruction capable of supporting constructivist pedagogies. Now, Clark and Mayer in 2016 argue that blended learning strategies such as the flipped learning offers smart solutions to bridging gaps between traditional classroom-based learning and digital learning by providing flexible, active, and individualized learning with technologies. Now, before the pandemic, flipped learning was traditionally conceptualized by combining pre-class asynchronous online learning and synchronous face-to-face learning. In a scoping review by O'Flaherty and Phillips in 2015, it was revealed that wide-ranging technologies and activities were implemented by faculty in the delivery of flipped learning in higher education. Pre-recorded lecture videos, podcasts, screencasts, readings, and other interactive resources commonly formed part of the asynchronous pre-class learning, whereas active learning strategies such as presentations, discussions, and debates typically formed part of the face-to-face learning. Now, similar patterns were observed in flipped K-12 classes. Satparam and Apps in 2022 in their systematic review found out that K-12 teachers typically deliver pre-class learning activities through video watching, readings, online tests, and other learning activities, and face-to-face learning typically included individual and group activities, scaffolded instruction, mini lectures, and presentations. Now, evidence on the benefits of flipped learning to students are widely documented in the literature. Among these are increased student satisfaction, increased academic performance, and the promotion of student empowerment and engagement. Now, blended learning approaches and flipped learning remained relevant when the COVID-19 pandemic forced school closures. Educational institutions implemented various learning modalities for learning to continue. The Philippine Department of Education, for instance, directed schools to primarily consider modular distance learning, online distance learning, TV and radio-based instruction, blended learning, and homeschooling. Now, on the other hand, the Philippine Commission on Higher Education directed higher education institutions to adopt flexible learning modalities that will cater to students given their access to devices and connectivity. Now, as challenges overwhelmed teachers and students in the early implementation of learning modalities in the new normal, balancing offline, online, asynchronous, and synchronous learning seemed to have provided a practical option. Flipped learning appeared to have offered smart ways for optimizing teachers' instruction, students' learning, and the use of available technologies. However, this required to reinvent the conventional idea of flipped learning from combining online and face-to-face learning to combining asynchronous and synchronous activities in a fully online setup. Now, with this apparent need for reinvention, studies exploring the viability of online flipped courses, their effect on student performance, and the perceptions of learners must be conducted to provide foundational evidence on the effectiveness of the reinvented approach. Now, this study was an attempt to address those needs. Specifically, this study was guided by the following research questions. First, what is the effect of online flipped learning on student performance in a mathematics course? And second, what are the students' perceptions of their online flipped learning experience? Now, the study employed a pre-experimental research design. The locale of the study is the Bicol University College of Education, which is a teacher education institution in the province of Albay. It caters to pre-service teachers training and has integrated schools for basic education. And the targeted course was college and advanced algebra. The student participants in this study were first year students, a total of 34 enrolled during the first semester, school year 2021-2022. Now, the students had been undergoing home-based instruction for 3 semesters already when they took up the online flipped course. The online flipped course was implemented in a completely online setup with the aid of a learning management system, a video conferencing app, a teacher-owned pen tool-enabled tablet, video materials, ebooks, and students' own devices. Weekly pre-class activities were made available starting Saturday, and in-class sessions were held every Tuesday and Friday. Now, the matrix on the screen briefly outlines the structure of the online flipped course that guided the implementation of the study. Essentially, the pre-class aspect of the online flipped course was composed of video watching, reading activities, and comprehension checks, whereas the in-class aspect was primarily carried out through question and answer, mini lectures, individual and group exercises, and next day preparations. Now, in gathering the data, the study employed the use of pre-test and post-test, perception survey questionnaire on flipped learning experience, and focus group discussions. Now, the pre-test and post-test construction followed the standard procedures in developing and validating a test. 31 out of 34 students completed both tests. Connectivity issues hindered 3 from taking either or both of the tests. Now, the perception survey questionnaire was modeled from a similar perception survey questionnaire by Graciano and Hall in 2017, which is a 5-point Likert checklist that surveyed students' perceptions of their online flipped learning experience along motivation, effectiveness, engagement, and enjoyment. Lastly, focus group discussions were conducted to further understand how the students perceived their online flipped learning experience. These were held 2 weeks after the semester ended. All the participants were fully aware of their participation in the study and signed a consent form for the survey and focus group discussions. Now, on to the results. The total score of both the pre-test and post-test was 50. The set of questions in the two tests was the same, covering the identified scope for the course and targeting the solving of algebra problems as applied in real-world situations. Now, a paired t-test showed a significant difference between the pre-test mean and the post-test mean, indicating that the exposure to the online flipped learning approach resulted in an improvement in student performance. The Cohen's d value was 1.89, indicating a very large effect size. Now, this notable finding on the effect on student performance in the online flip course matches those in some studies contextualized in conventional flipped learning. However, more studies and continuous discussions on online flipped learning should be conducted to strengthen this early idea in the same way as research on conventional flipped learning should be further investigated, since mixed and contradictory results on its effectiveness continue to populate the flipped learning discourse. Now, the table you see on the screen presents the summary of the quantitative data collected from the survey on students' perceptions of their online flipped learning experience in terms of motivation, effectiveness, engagement, and enjoyment. So as you can notice, all the indicators in the perception survey were rated high by the students, as evidenced by the high means and low standard deviations. Now, this suggests that students in the online flipped learning perceived that the online flipped learning design and delivery was motivating, effective, engaging, and enjoyable. On the other hand, data from the focus group discussions were coded, analyzed, and organized into thematic categories. And here are the salient findings. It was found that first, the flipped learning, the pre-class learning capacitated students for the in-class learning. A sample narrative from a student reads that the benefit of pre-class learning is it helped them acquire prior knowledge of what will be taught in the in-class learning, so they become well prepared for the in-class session because of those activities. Second is that the in-class learning allowed for deeper learning of concepts. Sample narrative centered on the idea that the students were given enough opportunity to explore the problems, and the overall process during the in-class sessions was facilitative of understanding as they can approach the instructor directly. Thirdly, the online flipped learning is preferable to students over other learning modalities. Interestingly, all students expressed their preference for flipped learning over other flexible learning modalities, such as full online synchronous, fully asynchronous, printed modular. And based on the interview data, the major factors that influence their preference are the affordances that flipped learning offers in terms of self-regulation, flexibility, scaffolding, and cost effectiveness. A couple of students interestingly cited the better cost effectiveness of the approach as compared to the printed modular and fully online synchronous modes of instruction, citing that the former typically entails transportation expenses and the latter requires costly subscriptions. Now, these data obtained from the focus group discussions underscored the idea that online flipped learning may offer similar benefits as that of conventional flipped learning. The findings on the perceived benefits of students exposed to online flipped learning in this study parallel those with the reviews done on the effectiveness of conventional flipped learning, such as those of O'Flaherty and Phillips 2015, Satparam and Apps 2022, which highlighted self-regulation, flexibility, and scaffolding as primary benefits. One interesting finding, however, in the present study is the perceived benefit on cost effectiveness, which may be lacking in conventional flipped courses. Now, one theme from the discussion data, however, concerns the major challenge in implementing online flipped learning. Erratic internet connectivity was the major challenge in the online flipped learning implementation, which affected students' engagement in pre-class and in-class learning. Now, this challenge, nonetheless, was minimized by uploading the session recording to the learning management system immediately after a session was finished. Several students maintained that the recordings were a big help to them. When they forgot something about a certain topic, they can watch it again. And also those who were not able to attend the in-class session can still watch it and catch up. Now, the experience of students on viewing the uploaded session recording suggests that the scaffolding provided to students during the actual in-class sessions was extended beyond the in-class hours when students were further learning on their own. Now, this finding parallels the insights in the literature drawn on the challenges of conventional flipped learning and how to address them, citing the major issue on digital divide as the most challenging. Now, on to the conclusion. This study was driven by the premise that school closures have allowed for the reinvention of the conventional structuring of flipped learning. This exploratory study aimed at providing foundational insights on the viability of an online flipped course, its effect on student performance, and the students' perceptions of their online flipped learning experience. Three key insights were drawn from this study. First, the positive insights shared by the students highlighted that the online flipped learning has afforded the characteristics of an ideal flipped learning setup commonly achieved in conventional flipped classes. Second, the online flipped course greatly contributed to the learning of students as evidenced by the students' improved test scores. And lastly, students were largely positive about their online flipped learning experience and favored flipped learning over other flexible learning modalities. Overall, this study provided evidence on the potential of online flipped learning to provide a sustainable approach to support learning continuity in times of educational disruptions. Now, the design sample and context of this study, however, presented certain limitations. Hence, caution in interpreting the results is advised. Future research endeavors may consider using experimental or quasi-experimental designs to draw more comparable data. Further, students from different year levels may be examined, and the possibility of designing and implementing other online flip courses may be considered. This ends up my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I would also like to express my sincerest thanks to Bicol University College of Education, Bicol University Research Development and Management Division for the support extended in the conduct of this study. Also, I am grateful to the experts who contributed to the establishment of the validity of the course design and data gathering tools, Professor Richard Lorente, Professor Aljan Vincent Peñano, Professor Marvin Gabatin, Professor Maria Sheena Haushan, and Dr. Norma Magdato. Finally, sincerest thanks to the participants of the study, the 2021 cohort of first-year BUCE Bachelor of Secondary Education major in mathematics students. Again, thank you very much for your kind attention.